Hello everybody, and welcome to Vocabulary Unit 14. This is a rather long unit in terms of the length of the list. Therefore, we're going to divide it into two sections. And today we're only going to go through the first 20 or so terms, going from a lot to, I believe, insatiable. Yeah, I think that's where we're going to cut off today. Okay, so let's jump right in. Okay. If you're going to allot a certain amount of material or supplies to people, it means you're just going to apportion or to give out a certain amount. You do it as a share, perhaps, or even as a task. For example, he was allotted with the responsibility of collecting the tickets. Equal time was allotted to each person. You've probably heard of the movies, which deal with the Avengers. So an Avenger is a person who wants revenge, right? A person who exacts or inflicts punishment. Or in some way inflicts a certain kind of harm. For example, Oedipus at one point swears to be the avenger of King Laius's death. He's going to make everything right. In junior year, you probably worked with some ballads, maybe Edward Edward or Sir Patrick Spens or Get Up and Bar the Door. A ballad is a poem or even a song that narrates some kind of event. Usually it's a tragic event. So it narrates some kind of story in short stanzas. Usually there's a repeating refrain in a ballad, but there are songs that are ballads, there are poems that are ballads, and they were most popular during the medieval period when you studied that last year, I'm sure, in your British Lit class. A bower is a pleasant, shady place. Under some trees, perhaps, or some plants. You probably remember from Lord of the Flies last year about Simon's bower. He had that little alcove, his little place, his covert where he would go and just meditate, right? Bygone days. When you talk about days that are bygone, you're talking about days that belong to an earlier time. So if we're talking about a bygone civilization, we might be examining the relics of that civilization from the past. A coalition can be a group of a lot of things, so we'll just simply refer to it as an alliance. There was a coalition that was formed, you might say, between Antonio and the ruler of Naples. He needed Alonso's help in order to overthrow Prospero. The word comrade is another word for a companion or a friend. If you say that Jean and Phineas were comrades, you're saying that they were companions. Right? That was his old high school comrade that he ran into. To dabble is to take part in something, but only in a kind of casual way. You're involved in it, but you're not super serious about it. So he was dabbling in music, he was dabbling in painting. It was kind of like a simple way for him to pass the time. It was very sort of relaxed and not very intense or anything like that. He dabbled a little bit in writing. If there's a dearth of materials, it means that there's a lack of them, a scarcity of them. Okay, so if there's a dearth of evidence pointing to somebody, it means that you don't have enough to prove someone's guilt. Now, you've probably heard the word dervish after the expression whirling, because the dervish is the member of the Muslim religious order and they were kind of known for their frenetic ways of dancing, thus the word whirling. They were known for their wild dances and their rituals. So you probably have heard, oh, that child ran through the room like he was a whirling dervish, you know. And dewy comes from actual dew, right? So anything that is dewy is wet with dew. We talk about dewy watercress, or you can use it in terms of skin. When a person's skin is soft and lustrous, you could say, oh, your skin will feel revitalized and dewy, right? So it can also mean in terms of skin, lustrous and soft. So I'll just put in parentheses in terms of skin. It's moisturized, I guess you could say. Okay, the dregs are what you find at the bottom of a glass. They're the kind of the leftover sediment at the bottom of a glass, or the dregs of society would be the lowest of the low. You know, you talk about coffee dregs, something that is low or at the bottom. If I'm using it figuratively about somebody being the dregs of society, I'm basically saying that they are something that drags on it. Now, egoist was not in the dictionary, so when you look it up, you may not be able to find it per se. But an egoist is going to put his own self first. So an egoist is a self-centered person. Their thoughts are about I, me, my first. To be enamored of something is to be in love with it, right? To be filled with a feeling of love or admiration. Ferdinand was enamored of Miranda upon seeing her for the very first time, and he, right? It's not difficult to see why he was enamored of her. To eschew is to shun, to put aside, to abstain from. At the end of the play, we know that Prospero winds up eschewing his magic, a very interesting decision on his part, to deliberately avoid using it. Right? And so this rough magic, I hear abjure, he says, but he could have put the synonym of eschew in there in the same thing. Expiation is a manner of making penance. It is the act of making reparation or amends. This is what Ariel the harpy is trying to tell the three noblemen that they must do. The act of repentance, you could say, atonement, right? If you're searching for expiation, you're searching for a way to ease the guilt of your wrongdoing. It was an act of public expiation. You know, you're asking for forgiveness. To falter is to lose strength or to lose momentum, to stumble. When asked his name, when Miranda was asked her name, she doesn't even falter. She immediately tells Ferdinand her name and then has to stop and say, oh my goodness, I broke my father's behest to say so. Fetters are chains or manacles. This is often used for prisoners. You think of Cask of Amontillado and the fact that Montresor fetters Fortunato to the wall. And he's going to bury him there alive in the catacombs, right? He's going to bury him in the catacombs there alive. They're, the kind of bindings that you would use. To be moved into a frenzy is a state of uncontrolled excitement or wild behavior. The boys were moved to a frenzy when they said their chant, kill the beast, cut his throat, spill his blood. They got caught up in it, right, and worked themselves into a frenzy until they ultimately wound up killing Simon, right? Heath. A heath is an open area of grassland. And this is where the witches meet Macbeth. An area of open, uncultivated land. Where? Upon the heath to meet Macbeth. Ah, yes, that's where they're going to give him his prophecies that start the chain reaction of crazy things. Inconceivable, not able to be thought of, right? Not capable of being imagined. It's inconceivable to think that Jocasta is really Oedipus's mother. It's like beyond your wildest imagination. And yet, how sad that's true. And we'll just do one more today, and that is insatiable. And again, not able to be satiated. So what does satiated mean? You cannot be, impossible to be satisfied. An insatiable thirst or an insatiable hunger means it cannot be quenched. Right? You might have an insatiable hunger for success. Antonio seems to have an insatiable drive for power. You know, here he is plotting the death of Alonso and Gonzalo, and they're still on the island. So something that cannot be quenched. And let's call it a day with that, because the list is very, very long. So that's plenty for today. Okay? Tune in next time for the remainder of these words.